Welcome to Dusky Lore. Close your eyes, dim the lights, and listen closely as the shadows begin to speak. Story 1. My name is Kennel. I was 17 years old in 2021, and I lived with my parents in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Peaceful streets, full of identical houses and neighbors who greeted each other with a smile, even though they almost never stopped to talk. But that night, the ordinary turned into something I had only seen in movies. It was a rainy Saturday, and my parents had gone to some friend's house a few streets away to play chess. They loved those games, but for me, there was nothing more boring than listening to adults argue about pawns and strategies. I told them I preferred to stay home. My plan was simple: make some snacks and watch a new horror movie called No One Gets Out Alive. By 9:30 p.m., I was already comfortable on the couch, with the lights dimmed, while the sound of rain hitting the windows created an unsettling atmosphere. I was halfway through the movie when something made me pause it, a strange noise coming from outside. At first, I thought it was the wind or the storm, but the sound continued. I tried to ignore it, telling myself, "Calm down, Kennel. Don't start imagining things." Then at exactly 10 p.m., a loud bang echoed through the whole house. It was not thunder. The sound was coming from the front door. My heart jumped and I froze. Who would knock at that hour and in that weather? I walked over slowly, trying not to make any noise, and looked through the peephole. A woman was standing on the porch. She looked about 30 years old, wearing a soaked rain jacket, and her hair was dripping from the rain. Her face was pale and full of desperation. "Please," she shouted, barely audible through the downpour. "I need help. My car broke down and my phone isn't working. Can I use yours to call someone?" I hesitated, feeling my pulse quicken. In the light from the street lamp, I could make out her car parked by the curb. The engine was still running. That seemed strange to me. Why would it be running if the vehicle had broken down? I narrowed my eyes, trying to understand the situation, and against all logic, I opened the door. The woman was shivering from the cold. "Thank you," she murmured as she stepped forward. But at that moment, I saw him, a man in a black hoodie running toward the house. His face was partially covered, and in his hand he was holding a weapon. Terror paralyzed me. I slammed the door shut before the woman could come inside. I turned the deadbolt and fastened the chain. She started screaming and pounding on the door desperately. "Let me in, you don't understand," she begged. The man reached the porch and started banging on the door hard. "Open up," he roared with a mixture of anger and desperation. I stumbled backward, my heart beating so hard that I felt like I might faint. Suddenly, the sound of glass breaking came from the back of the house. My breathing stopped. I ran to the kitchen and saw him. The man was trying to climb through the broken window. Without thinking, I grabbed a heavy frying pan and threw it at him. He managed to dodge it, but his hand got caught on the broken glass, leaving bloodstains on the frame. He cursed loudly and backed away, disappearing into the shadows. I ran back to the living room, my hands shaking, and grabbed my phone. I dialed 911 with numb fingers, my voice trembling as I explained to the operator what was happening. She assured me that officers were already on the way and told me not to hang up, to stay somewhere safe. The pounding on the front door became more violent, and the woman's voice turned frantic. "You don't understand. Please let us in," she screamed between sobs. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door, clutching the phone as if it were my only hope. I quickly texted my parents, warning them not to come back home. My father replied almost immediately. He had contacted the neighbors to ask for help too. The minutes turned into an eternity. The operator kept talking to me, trying to keep me calm, but I could barely hear her over the sound of the wind and rain. Suddenly, everything went silent. The banging stopped. I stood still, holding my breath, trying to catch any sound. Then I heard them. Footsteps. They were coming from upstairs. Terror ran through my body. The attic window, I had not even thought about that. Had they climbed onto the roof? The footsteps were getting closer, clearer and clearer, coming down toward the staircase. My mind was racing. Outside, sirens began to sound in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed through the small bathroom window. I stayed completely still, waiting for the police to arrive before they found me. A hard knock on the bathroom door made me jump. "Police!" a voice shouted. I hesitated for a moment, afraid it was a trap, but then I heard more voices coming from downstairs. Quick commands and firm footsteps. I gathered all the courage I had left, unlocked the door, and opened it slightly. Several officers were moving through the house, shining their flashlights into every corner. "All clear," one of them said, although his tone gave me no sense of relief at all. The attic window was open, but the intruders were already gone. The officers took my statement while others searched the area. My parents arrived a few minutes later, their faces pale and their eyes full of anguish. My father hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "We will never leave you alone again, I promise," he said in a firm voice. Hours later, the police reported that the woman's car had been found abandoned several streets away. It turned out to be stolen. Inside, they found duct tape, plastic zip ties, and a knife. The blood on the window frame matched that of a suspect connected to other break-ins in the area. The rest of the night passed like a blur. I could not sleep, reliving what had happened over and over again, thinking about what would have happened if I had let them in. Just imagining it made my stomach turn. The woman and the man were never caught, and that is what still haunts me. Story 2. This story happened in 2017 on Christmas Day, when I was still a teenager. My family was organizing a big gathering. All of my cousins were coming, including first, second, and then third cousins. I was very excited since it had been 3 years since the last time I had seen many of them. It seemed like the perfect moment to reunite and celebrate together. The guests started arriving between 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. The house filled with greetings, laughter, and lively conversations. Very soon, the dining table was covered with dishes full of different foods that everyone had brought to share. Among the guests was also Lester, my father's cousin. He brought a fruit bowl and a fairly cheerful attitude. However, something about him seemed strange to me. I had never met him in person before, since he lived in California and we lived on the East Coast. So I thought maybe I just needed to get used to the way he was. Even so, I could not shake the feeling that there was something odd about him. Lunch was served around 2:30, and we all sat down to eat and talk. We shared stories about what we had been doing lately, and the atmosphere was warm and full of energy. I was really happy to see everyone reconnecting after being apart for so long. When we finished, we took the dishes to the kitchen to help with the cleanup. At that moment, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a call from my best friend Elsa. I answered and went up to my room to have some privacy, since I did not want anyone to hear our conversation. We talked for about 15 minutes about our Christmas plans and the gifts we had received. When I hung up, I stretched and got ready to go back to the family. Just then, I heard a knock at the door. It was Lester. I was surprised to see him there. What did he want to talk to me about? Even so, I told him he could come in. He walked in slowly, looking around with curiosity. "Hi," he said with a smile. "How's school going?" I replied that everything was fine, that I was enjoying my first year of high school. He asked me a few more questions about my classes and teachers. Up to that point, everything seemed normal. But then he suddenly said something that left me confused. "Have you ever noticed anything strange in this house?" I blinked, puzzled. "Strange? What do you mean?" I asked him. He tilted his head and smiled in a way that made me uncomfortable. "Oh, I don't know," he murmured. "Sometimes old houses keep their secrets." I did not know how to respond. I shrugged and told him I had never noticed anything out of the ordinary. He nodded, muttered something under his breath that I could not understand, and left the room. Even after he was gone, I could not shake the uneasy feeling he had left behind. Later, when the afternoon turned into night, we all gathered in the living room to open gifts. Between laughter and conversation, I noticed that Lester kept to himself, sitting by the window and staring outside with a thoughtful, almost worried expression. I asked him if he was okay, and he simply replied, "Oh, I'm fine, I just enjoy the view." The strange thing was that there was not much to look at. Outside it was dark, and you could barely make out the outlines of the trees in the backyard. As the night went on, his behavior became even stranger. He wandered around the house, stopping now and then to stare at random objects. The family portraits hanging on the wall, the old clock in the hallway, or the decorations on the mantel. At one point I saw him standing in front of the basement door, staring at it. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Oh, nothing," he replied quickly. "I was just curious. Curious about the basement? There was nothing special about it. It was an old, unfinished space where we kept boxes and things we no longer used. There was nothing interesting down there." Around 9 o'clock at night, most of the relatives decided to leave. Between hugs and goodbyes, the house gradually emptied until only my parents, my siblings, and Lester were left. My parents offered to let him stay the night, since it was too late for him to drive back to his hotel. I did not really like the idea, but I chose not to say anything. That night, already lying in bed, I was scrolling through my phone without much interest when I heard a creak coming from downstairs. It sounded like slow footsteps on the wooden floor. I assumed it was my father checking that the doors were locked, or maybe Lester getting up for a glass of water. But then I heard something that made me sit up. The squeak of the basement door opening, followed by footsteps slowly going down the stairs. Curiosity got the better of my fear. I quietly got out of bed and walked down the hallway to the top of the stairs. From there, I could see a faint glow. The basement light was on. I crouched down and looked below. There was Lester. He was holding a flashlight and carefully examining something on the floor, as if he were searching for or inspecting something hidden. "Lester," I called cautiously. He jumped and turned off the flashlight immediately. "Oh, hi," he said with a forced smile, trying to sound relaxed. "I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd take a look around. I find basements fascinating, you know." Fascinating, I thought. That was not exactly the word I would use to describe ours. It was a cold space, with old shelves, dusty boxes, and a few cobwebs. There was nothing down there that could be considered interesting. I did not know what to say, so I just stood there watching him. He avoided my gaze, walked up the stairs, and passed by me without saying another word. His behavior put me completely on edge. The next morning when I went downstairs for breakfast, my parents told me that Lester had left early. According to them, he had to catch a flight and preferred to leave before it was fully morning. But something about that explanation did not sit right with me. I felt that he had not left simply because he was in a hurry. Driven by curiosity, I decided to take a look at the basement. I walked down slowly. The air down there was cold and smelled like dust and old wood. Everything seemed the same, except for one detail. One of the floorboards near the back wall was lifted. I crouched down and carefully moved it aside. Underneath there was a small hollow space, and inside it, a dusty, old box covered in cobwebs. I pulled it out and opened it with trembling hands. Inside were yellowed letters and old photographs, some dated from the 1940s. They seemed to belong to the previous owners of the house. They were simple keepsakes, family portraits, notes, postcards, nothing out of the ordinary. But what made my blood run cold was wondering why Lester had been so interested in them. When I told my parents what I had found, they were just as confused as I was. None of us had any idea why Lester had been snooping around in the basement, or why he had left without saying goodbye. To this day, I still wonder what he was really looking for, and why he acted so strangely that night. It was a Christmas impossible to forget, not because of the gifts or the family joy, but because of the lingering mystery of Uncle Lester and the secrets he seemed to be chasing in the shadows of the basement. Before moving on to the next story, if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell so you can watch the next scary stories. We need your support. Share these stories with your friends and family. Thank you. Story 3. In 2019, I started my first year at Queens College in New York City. Now, as a senior, I look back on that time with mixed feelings. Back then, I was nervous but also excited to begin my film studies. Since I was from Chicago, I only went back home during breaks, so I spent most of my time on campus. Orientation day was stressful. I was not sure whether I would be able to make friends or fit in, but by the end of the day, I had already connected with several classmates in my program. However, among all of them, there was one person who caught my attention. For the wrong reasons. Dylan. From the very beginning, I noticed something strange about him. He had a weird, unpredictable energy. He was always talking about obscure movies or making nonsensical jokes that nobody understood. At first, I thought he was just socially awkward, but over time his behavior started to make me uneasy. As the weeks went by, his attitude became more and more uncomfortable. He would insert himself into conversations without being invited and talk loudly about topics so strange that nobody could follow what he was saying. Our small group of friends tolerated him only because of how persistent he was, but in reality, none of us liked having him around. One night, during dinner in the cafeteria, my friend Mary Kate mentioned something that sent chills down our spines. "Did you hear about Dylan?" she asked in a low voice. "Some girls say he has been following them back to their dorms. They are terrified." I felt my stomach turn. The idea that Dylan might be stalking someone did not completely surprise me, but hearing it confirmed made it real. From that moment on, I started avoiding him at all costs. Even so, somehow he always found a way to get close to us, acting as if nothing was wrong. One afternoon while we were having lunch, Dylan showed up uninvited as usual. But this time, his incoherent rambling took a darker tone. "Why does everyone look at me like I'm some kind of freak?" he said, frowning. "What is their problem?" I tried to stay quiet, but he kept pushing, his voice getting louder. Finally, I lost my patience. "Maybe because you don't respect other people's boundaries, Dylan. Not everything has to revolve around you," I snapped. His face twisted into an expression of restrained fury, but he did not answer. He stood up abruptly and walked away without looking back. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was very wrong. Thanksgiving break arrived, and I flew back to Chicago. My parents were delighted to have me home. As for me, I just wanted to rest and disconnect from everything for a while. One night around 9:30 p.m., I was in my room looking at my phone when I heard a light tap on the window. At first, I thought it was a prank or maybe branches moving in the wind. My room was on the ground floor, but nobody ever came near that window. I walked over curiously, pulled back the curtain, and froze. There, faintly lit by the streetlight, was Dylan. My heart leaped. How had he gotten to my house? What was he doing there? I let the curtain fall and stepped back, panic rising in my chest. My parents were in the living room, so I ran to them without thinking. "Mom, Dad, Dylan is outside at my window," I shouted, my voice trembling. "Who?" my father asked, frowning. "A guy from college. He has been acting weird, and now he's here." My mother got up immediately. "Let's go look." We went back to my room. She looked out the window and said calmly, "There's no one there." "But he was there, I swear," I insisted. "Maybe you're stressed," my father replied. "It's late. Try to get some sleep." I did not argue, but deep down I knew what I had seen. That night I could not fall asleep. My mind kept racing. How had he found my address? Had he been following me? During the next few days I could not relax. Every time I passed by a window or went out into the yard, I had the feeling that someone was watching me. I tried to convince myself that it had all been a misunderstanding, that maybe it was not Dylan but someone who looked like him. But deep down I knew something was wrong. When I returned to the university after the break, I knew something had changed. Dylan was no longer attending classes. Rumors quickly started spreading. People said he had been expelled for harassing other students. The news, though disturbing, brought me some relief. At least I thought I would not have to see him again. But that feeling of safety did not last long. One night, I stayed late at the library finishing a project. When I left, the campus paths were almost empty and covered in a light mist. As I walked back to my dorm, I got that unmistakable feeling that someone was following me. I turned discreetly. In the distance, a figure was walking behind me. I could not make out the face, but something inside me was screaming for me to run. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest, and I did not stop until I reached the entrance of the building. Once inside, I looked out the window, but the figure had already disappeared. During the following weeks, I started noticing small but unsettling things. A notebook that I swore I had left in my room appeared, inexplicably, inside my backpack. My dorm key disappeared for an entire day, and then it was back on my desk, as if someone had placed it there on purpose. I had no concrete proof, but deep down I knew it was him. Dylan. One afternoon I returned from campus after a night class and found something taped to my room door. A note written in shaky handwriting. I recognized it immediately. It was his handwriting. The message said, "You can't ignore me. We're not finished." Fear turned into anger. I grabbed the note and went straight to campus security. I told them everything, from what happened in Chicago to the strange behavior, my missing belongings, and the note I had just received. The officers listened carefully and assured me they would investigate the matter, telling me to stay alert. That night, however, the fear came back even stronger. I was in my room trying to concentrate when I heard footsteps outside, right below my window. This time I did not dare look. I grabbed my phone and called campus security immediately. They arrived within minutes, but by then whoever had been there was already gone. The only thing they found were fresh footprints in the snow, marking a trail that led away toward the woods behind the campus. After that night, the noises stopped. No one ever saw Dylan again. Some said he had moved away. Others said he had been committed or arrested. I never learned the truth, but his shadow remained. Since then, I adopted habits that I still keep to this day. I always check twice to make sure the doors are locked. I avoid walking alone at night, and I am very careful about the personal information I share. I do not know what became of Dylan, or whether I will ever cross paths with him again. The only thing I know is that the experience changed me forever, leaving me with a lesson I will never forget. True terror is not always in the movies. Sometimes it walks right beside you. Story 4. I will never forget my first job. I was in my senior year of high school and eager to earn some extra money during the summer. I took the opportunity to work at a small but cozy movie theater. It was not far from my house. The pay was decent, and the ad clearly said, "No experience required." The idea of working surrounded by movies and the smell of popcorn seemed perfect to me. As soon as I submitted my application, I was hired almost immediately. The theater manager, Mr. Reynolds, had a calm but intense presence, with a look that commanded respect. His instructions were simple. Clean the counters and the seats, take out the trash, restock the concession stand, and help your coworker with the tickets. Then he added something else. And one important thing, do not stay after 2 in the morning. Lock up and leave right away. No exceptions. His tone was so serious, almost grim, that it unsettled me for a moment. But I was so excited about my first job that I did not pay too much attention to it. During the first month, everything went by without incident. My coworker, Alexa, was kind although reserved, and our shifts passed quickly. The pay was better than expected, and I had no reason to complain. However, over time, I began to notice strange things. On some nights, especially weekends, Alexa seemed nervous, as if she wanted to finish as quickly as possible. She always rushed to close before 1:30 a.m. and asked me to do the same. One time, I caught her speaking quietly with Mr. Reynolds. They both seemed tense. When I asked her what it was about, she forced a smile. "It's nothing important. Just make sure you close quickly, okay?" I did not press the issue, but that uneasy feeling stayed with me. Everything changed one Friday night, just before closing. Alexa had left early, leaving me in charge of everything. I did not mind. That way I could clean quietly at my own pace. The theater was empty. The last showing had ended hours earlier, and the silence felt strangely comforting. Until I saw it. While I was cleaning the concession counter, I looked up and noticed something reflected in the glass display case. At first I thought it was a smudge, but the silhouette moved. It was blurry, barely visible, but unmistakable. A figure standing at the end of the lobby, motionless, wrapped in shadows. I turned around immediately, my heart racing. The lobby was empty. "Calm down, you're tired," I muttered, trying to convince myself. I finished cleaning as quickly as I could, locked up, and went outside with the trash bag toward the dumpster in the back. The parking lot was deserted, lit only by streetlights that flickered on and off. Suddenly I heard footsteps behind me. I froze. The footsteps stopped too. The air grew heavy. I turned slowly, but I did not see anyone. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught a movement. A shadow slipping behind the side wall of the theater. Fear paralyzed me. I dropped the bag and ran back inside, locking the door behind me. When I looked through the glass entrance, I saw it again. The figure standing outside, its face covered by a mask. It was watching me. The next morning, I went straight to Mr. Reynolds and told him everything. To my surprise, he did not seem surprised. "You probably imagined it," he said in a flat voice. "It wasn't my imagination," I insisted. "There was someone outside. He was wearing a mask." His jaw tightened. "Focus on your work and make sure you close on time. That's all I'm going to say." I walked away frustrated. I found Alexa and asked her for an explanation. She hesitated for a few seconds before whispering, "This place is strange. I've seen things too. Shadows, whispers, footsteps when no one is there. That's why I never stay late." I felt a chill run through me. Then why doesn't anyone say anything? Why do we keep working here? "Mr. Reynolds doesn't want to talk about it," she replied. "But I've heard rumors. They say that years ago a man worked here, someone disturbed. He was obsessed with the late-night screenings. One night he lost his mind and attacked a coworker during his shift." "And the mask?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "He wore it to hide his identity. They caught him, but some people say his spirit is still here, reliving that night over and over again." An icy shiver ran down my spine. The following Saturday, Alexa called in sick, and once again I had to close alone. I promised myself I would finish early and leave without delay, but something felt different that night. The air seemed heavier, charged with a strange energy. Every sound, the creak of the floor, the hum of the projector, made me jump. While I was cleaning the last theater, the lights flickered and then went out completely. I stood still, my heart pounding. "Alexa," I called, my voice shaking. There was no response. The beam of light swept across the rows of seats, and then stopped on something. At the back, standing in the darkness, was a figure wearing a mask. I screamed, dropped my phone, and ran toward the lobby. The glass doors were shut, but I could see him again outside, his silhouette lit by the flickering streetlights. Suddenly, the projector in Theater 1 turned on by itself. The door was slightly open, and inside, distorted images were playing on the screen. Images of the same theater. I saw myself cleaning the lobby. The clock showed the exact time from that night. I stepped back in horror. The image changed. Now it showed me in the auditorium sweeping between the rows. Then a cut. The camera showed the masked figure standing behind me, so close that I should have felt it. A voice whispered behind me, "You're late." I let out a scream and ran toward the emergency exit. The door would not move. "Your time is up," the voice whispered again, closer this time. I pushed with all my strength, and finally the door gave way. I ran into the parking lot without looking back, tears in my eyes, until the building was out of sight. The next morning I quit without giving any explanation. I ignored Mr. Reynolds' calls. Alexa texted me asking what had happened, but I did not have the courage to tell her. Over time, rumors began to spread. Unexplained accidents, missing employees, lights turning on by themselves. I do not know what was haunting that theater, whether it was the spirit of the masked man or something even worse. Story 5. I never imagined that my dog Rocky would end up saving my life. Rocky is a German Shepherd with brown fur, well-defined black markings, and a big fluffy tail. He has always been loyal, protective, and affectionate. To me, he was nothing more than an adorable pet, until that terrifying night showed me that he was much more than that. It was late November, and the nights were starting to get colder. I live alone in a small, cozy house on the edge of the woods. It is a quiet place, far from the noise of the city. Rocky and I spend most evenings curled up on the couch, him lying at my feet while I read or watch television. That calm had become part of my life, although sometimes when the wind blows hard through the trees, it can feel unsettling. That night the wind was howling, making the wooden walls creak. I was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, drinking hot tea. Rocky was resting near the door with his head on his paws, half asleep. It had been a long day and I was ready to go to bed. But then something changed. Rocky lifted his head suddenly. His ears stood up, tense, and his eyes locked onto the door. "What's wrong, boy?" I asked, though I did not expect an answer. He did not move. He just kept staring, his body rigid, a low growl escaping from his chest. The sound echoed through the stillness of the room, and my heart started to race. I tried to listen, but I could only hear the wind outside. I thought maybe it was a deer or another animal from the woods. Living so close to nature meant getting used to certain noises. But Rocky did not usually react like that, unless something was really wrong. I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain back a little to look outside. The yard was empty, the shadows of the trees moving in the moonlight. I sighed in relief. "See, there's nothing, Rocky." I did not finish the sentence. Rocky jumped up suddenly and started barking loudly, running toward the door. His nails scraped against the wooden floor as he came to a hard stop. I felt a knot in my stomach. I could not see anything. I could not hear anything. But his instincts were telling me that something was not right. I grabbed my phone just in case. Then I heard it. A soft sound, barely noticeable, like footsteps on the gravel path. So faint that for a moment I thought I had imagined it. But Rocky barked again, louder this time, his snout pressed against the bottom of the door. Someone was outside. With trembling hands, I dialed the emergency number. My voice shook as I explained to the operator what was happening. She told me to stay calm, not to hang up, and that officers were already on the way. That was easy to say. Doing it was not so easy. I backed away a few steps, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. Rocky stayed in front of the door, growling in a low, deep tone. His tail was stiff. Suddenly, a bang thundered against the door. It was not a simple knock. It was sharp, violent, as if someone were trying to break it down. My heart nearly stopped. Rocky lunged fiercely, barking with a rage I had never heard from him before. He threw himself against the door with all his weight. determined to keep whoever was outside from coming in. The sound of wood splintering made me scream. Whoever was on the other side had no intention of giving up. "Get away from the door," I shouted, even though I knew they would not hear me over the barking and the crashing. I backed into the living room looking for something to defend myself with. My eyes landed on the fireplace poker, and I grabbed it, holding it tightly. Then the door burst open. The frame shattered, and a man came crashing into the house. He was dressed in black with a mask covering his face. He was tall, broad, and his mere presence left me frozen. But Rocky did not hesitate. With a fierce growl, he launched himself at him. It happened so fast I could barely see him move. The man stumbled backward, caught off guard by the attack. Rocky sank his teeth into his arm, shaking his head furiously. The intruder screamed with a guttural sound, a cry that made my blood run cold. For a few seconds I could not move, but instinct finally made me react. "Get out," I shouted, my voice trembling. The man struggled desperately, but Rocky would not let go. Blood soaked the attacker's sleeve, and I could see panic reflected even behind the mask. Finally, he managed to shove Rocky away and ran, clutching his injured arm. Rocky chased him to the edge of the yard, barking non-stop until silence took over the place again. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking. Rocky came trotting back to me, wagging his tail as if nothing had happened. His snout and fur were stained with blood, but he did not seem hurt. I hugged him tightly, tears running down my cheeks. "Good boy. You're a good boy," I repeated over and over again. The police arrived shortly afterward. They took my statement and inspected the damage to the door. One of the officers bent down to pet Rocky and called him a hero. They told me that, based on the footprints, the intruder had probably been watching the house for some time, waiting for the perfect moment to break in. Just thinking about it gave me chills. I did not sleep that night. I could not stop thinking about what might have happened if Rocky had not been there. I no longer see him as just my pet. He is my guardian, my protector, the reason I am still alive. Even now, every time I walk past the broken door, a shiver runs through me. But all I have to do is look at Rocky, lying by the fire, watching me with those alert eyes, to remember that I am safe. Rocky saved my life, and that I will never forget. Story 6. This story happened during last year's Christmas vacation. I have a wonderful family, a loving husband, and 4 amazing children. We live in London, and that year we decided to celebrate Christmas somewhere different. My parents and my siblings were also going to join us, so we wanted something special, something different. After a lot of thought, we chose Greenland. It seemed like the perfect escape, a country of snowy landscapes, serene silence, and untouched natural beauty, far from the noise of the city. We had no idea that the trip would turn into a nightmare we would never forget. It was December 23rd when we took a night flight to Greenland. The journey was long but peaceful. We arrived around 11 p.m., exhausted from traveling. We picked up the rental car and drove about 10 minutes until we reached a small wooden chalet, cozy and surrounded by snow-covered hills. The moment my head touched the pillow that night, I fell deeply asleep. The next day was perfect. We explored the surroundings, amazed by the beauty of the frozen landscape. The children played happily, my parents laughed, and the fresh air filled us with energy. That night, sitting in front of the fireplace, I thought it would be one of the most beautiful Christmases of my life. I had no idea how wrong I was. Christmas morning began with joy. The living room filled with laughter as the children opened their gifts. We had breakfast together as a family, and at noon we all got into the car to take a short trip to a nearby mountain. The trail was breathtaking, surrounded by frost-covered trees and sparkling snow. After 15 minutes, we stopped to take pictures. Everything was happiness, until 3 men appeared. They came out of nowhere, their faces covered with black ski masks. My heart dropped when I realized what was happening. One of them had a knife. The other two had small but threatening guns. "No one scream, no one run," said the tallest one, with a cold voice empty of emotion. The children huddled close to my husband and me. I felt fear tightening in my chest. We were in the middle of nowhere, with no way to call for help. "Give us everything you have," another one ordered, waving his gun. My siblings and I started handing things over without hesitation. Phones, wallets, watches, everything we had on us. The men worked with precision, emptying our pockets and stuffing everything into a backpack. My husband tried to stay calm, whispering words of comfort to the children, but in his eyes I saw something else: helplessness and contained rage. The third man, shorter and more nervous, searched through our backpacks. "Is that all? Don't you have anything else?" he snapped, frustrated. "Please," I said, my voice breaking. "We don't have anything else. Take whatever you want, but leave us alone." He seemed to hesitate, but after a few seconds the men began to back away. For a moment I thought it was over, until the shorter one grabbed my youngest son, Liam, who was only 6 years old. "No," I screamed, throwing myself toward him, but the tallest man shoved me hard. "We need insurance," the shorter one said in a desperate tone, "in case you report us." "Let him go," my husband roared, stepping forward, but the man with the gun aimed straight at his chest. One more step and the boy dies. The world stopped. Liam's screams tore through the air as the 3 masked men dragged him toward the forest. I tried to run after them, but my siblings held me back. I fell to my knees in the snow, screaming, watching them disappear among the trees. We ran back to the car, panic driving every movement. My husband drove at full speed to the nearest police station, where we gave our statement through tears and trembling. The officers assured us they would do everything possible, but their faces told the truth. In that remote place, the chances were very small. That night, no one slept. Every sound outside the chalet made us jump in fear. The weight of guilt and despair crushed me. I could not stop thinking that somehow I had failed as a mother. The next morning, we left Greenland. We returned to London, but it felt as though part of us had remained there, frozen among those trees. The following days were a blur of pain, disbelief, and anguish. We worked closely with the police, but the leads were scarce. The men disappeared without a trace, taking my son and any hope with them. Weeks turned into months. Every call from the investigation department filled me with a mixture of hope and terror, but the answers never came. I took a leave of absence from work. I could not focus on anything. My parents and siblings tried to support us, but nothing filled the emptiness. Our home, once full of laughter, became silent, too large and too empty. My other children spoke in whispers, as if noise itself could break something inside us. My husband and I tried to stay strong, but the pain was unbearable. To this day, we do not know what happened to Liam. The masked men were never caught. The investigation grew cold over time, but my heart did not. Every Christmas since then has been a painful reminder of what we lost in that white forest. I no longer think about lights, gifts, or songs, only about my son's laughter and the silent promise not to let his memory fade. Story 7. This happened in 2017. My friend Eric and I were in Texas for the weekend, looking for something fun to do. Eric had always been the adventurer of the group, the one who found the weirdest places or the craziest ideas. "I heard there's an abandoned psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of the city," he told me with a mischievous smile, as if he had just discovered a treasure. "They say it's haunted. Want to go see if it's true?" I was not too excited about the idea, but I was not about to let him call me a coward. Besides, it was daytime. What could happen in broad daylight? When we arrived, the place looked like something straight out of a horror movie. The building was huge, with broken windows and graffiti covering the walls. The front door hung crooked on its hinges, creaking softly in the wind. The whole building seemed to groan and complain, as if it were alive. "Looks like it's going to collapse on top of us," I joked, kicking some debris near the entrance. Eric laughed and walked in without thinking twice. I followed him, though my stomach was tied in knots. The air inside was thick, full of dust, with the smell of mold and something metallic. Sunlight came through the broken windows, but that did not make the place any less creepy. The hallway stretched out in front of us, long and dark, with doors on both sides. Most of them closed, others half open, as if they were inviting us in. There were faded signs on the walls and scribbled phrases that were impossible to understand. We explored for a while, finding nothing but empty rooms and broken furniture. It was as unsettling as we expected, but nothing paranormal was happening. Eric made jokes, knocking on the walls as if he were expecting some ghost to answer. Then we found the room. It was at the end of the hallway behind a heavy rusted steel door. The door was slightly ajar, and Eric, without thinking, pushed it open. The sound of the hinges was a screech that made my blood run cold. Inside, the room was almost empty, with only a few old chairs and a table. But what stood out the most were the strange symbols painted in black on the walls. The air was colder in there, and I did not understand why. The moment we stepped inside, we heard it. Children laughing. At first it was distant, soft, but little by little it grew louder, bouncing off the walls until it seemed to be coming from everywhere. Eric froze. I felt my heart start racing. "They're kids," he said, trying to sound calm. "They're probably outside, trying to scare us." Then we heard a tapping sound, as if a rock had hit the wall. Then another. "Great, now they're throwing rocks at us," Eric muttered, annoyed. "Let's teach them a lesson." We left the room following the sound of the laughter and the tapping. The building was quieter than before, the air heavier. When we reached the front door, Eric pulled it open and stepped outside. I followed him, squinting in the sunlight. But there was no one there. We looked around the overgrown property, behind the trees and bushes. Nothing. The place was completely empty. The laughter had disappeared too, leaving behind a silence so deep it made my skin crawl. "They couldn't have left that fast," Eric said, frowning. "Maybe they're hiding," I suggested, even though I did not believe it myself. The place was so open that there was nowhere to hide. Eric raised his voice. "Nice try, but you're not scaring us." His voice faded into the echo. We waited. Nothing. Just the murmur of the wind moving through the grass and the distant hum of traffic. Then, faint but unmistakable, the laughter returned. It was coming from inside the building. Eric and I looked at each other, and for the first time I saw fear on his face. "This isn't funny anymore," he said quietly. I did not answer. My chest felt tight, my hands sweaty. I did not want to go back inside, but we needed to understand what was happening. We moved forward slowly, our footsteps echoing on the hollow floor. The silence inside was different, heavy, as if the building were holding its breath. When we reached the room again, the door was completely open. I am sure we had left it half closed before, and inside, the chairs and the table were gone. Eric muttered a curse. "Let's get out of here now. This place is messing with our heads." For once, I did not argue. We practically ran out without looking back until we reached the car. During the drive back, neither of us said much. Eric kept looking in the rearview mirror, as if he expected to see something following us. I felt the same way. I just did not dare say it. Story 8. I was 8 years old, and my world was small, but it was full of wonders. The simplest things seemed magical to me. The soft crunch of snow under my boots, or the way the flakes sparkled under the street lights. One winter night, while everything outside was covered in a layer of fresh snow, something happened that I still cannot explain to this day. My father had just tucked me in, like he did every night. He pulled the blanket up to my chin, patted me on the head, and said, "Sleep well." I nodded, but I was not sleepy. Through the thin curtains on my window, I could see the snow falling, slow and steady. All I could think about was how beautiful the world outside must have looked. It was a warm and quiet night. The heater hummed softly, and the distant sound of a snowplow made everything feel safe. I waited until I heard my father's footsteps fading down the hallway and the soft creak of his bedroom door closing. Then I pushed the blankets aside and tiptoed over to the window. I pulled back the curtain and pressed my face against the cold glass. The snow was falling harder, glowing orange under the streetlights. The yard looked like a Christmas postcard, untouched, soft, with only a few small tracks leading toward the woods. I wondered if they belonged to a rabbit, or maybe a fox. I stood there watching in silence for several minutes. The stillness of the snow was hypnotic, but it also had something strange about it, as if the world outside my window did not belong to the same place as my house. And just when I started to feel like I was the only person awake on the planet, I heard it. A loud, sharp knock against my bedroom door. The sound startled me so badly that I gasped and turned around immediately. My heart was pounding, but I tried to calm myself. Maybe it was just the house creaking in the cold, or the heater making noise. But when I looked toward the door, my blood ran cold. There, standing in the doorway, was a figure. At first, I thought it was a person, or something like one. It was about my height, more or less, but something was terribly wrong. Its skin, or maybe its clothing, was completely black. Not like a shadow, but as if it were absorbing all the light in the room. The hallway was lit so I could make out its outline clearly, but it had no features, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a dark shape standing still, staring at me. I was frozen. My mind tried to find an explanation, but none of them made sense. Was it a trick of the light, a shadow being cast, or my parents playing a prank? No, it was too short to be my father, and my mother would never stand there silently like that. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice weak and trembling. The figure did not move. It did not respond. I wanted to scream, but I could not. My throat closed up, as if my body knew that making noise would be dangerous. For a few seconds, or maybe minutes, I do not know, I stood there staring at that motionless silhouette. Then, for some reason, I looked back toward the window. Maybe I thought that if I ignored it, it would disappear. Or maybe I was too scared to keep looking at it. The snow was still falling, but it no longer seemed beautiful. The yard that had looked magical before now felt empty, cold, dead. I do not know how long I stayed like that, staring outside and praying for the silence to feel normal again. Finally, I gathered the courage to look back at the door. The figure was gone. I ran to my bed, crawled under the blankets, and pulled them all the way over me. My heart was beating so fast that I could hear it in my ears. I did not move an inch for the rest of the night. The next morning, I told my parents what had happened. They looked at each other with a mix of concern and amusement. "It was probably a dream," my mother said, stroking my hand. "Or maybe you saw your own shadow," my father added. "The hallway light could have made it look different." I nodded, but I knew the truth. It was not a dream. I was completely awake, and what I saw was not my shadow. That thing never appeared again. But on winter nights when the snow falls and the house is silent, I sometimes remember it, and I cannot help but wonder, what was it? Why was it there? And why? Did it not do anything? I do not have answers. Only one certainty. I will never look out the window at night again.